What's going on, guys? Mr. GMT here, and it's time for my final review, or at least the early season thoughts and impressions of the Burton step-on binding system.
So let's start off with the ruler. I'm glad I went with this boot. The price tag is $100 cheaper than the Burton Photon boot, which I feel I didn't need that extra strap that goes over the ankle. If you saw my previous video, you'll know that I mentioned I didn't really have any hot spots. However, that's not entirely true. I will chalk this one up to the Burton inner boot lace system. This was on my back leg, so there was a lot of use, a lot of movement, and maybe I over-tightened the boot a little bit, so that's what caused the friction. But overall, this is a great boot and I highly recommend it. I don't really have any negatives to say. Also, in my prior video, you probably saw me having difficulty getting this boot off. However, as the days of use went on, the boot got easier to take off, so I'm just going to chalk that one up to it being a new boot. Now let's move on to the bindings. Let's start with the install. If you saw my video, you'll see that EST is still only 2 bolts, and it's easy to install. Nothing overly complicated about this system. In the future, I would like to see Burton go back to EST specific bindings. Technology is already there, and I feel that you should give your rider back all the customization that you had originally, as this is a product I was using 7 years ago. Moving along to the entry of the binding. Entry is fairly simple with 3 points of contact. You'll need to align the heel cleat first to lock the boot into the binding, and then push your 2 toe points down into the binding to lock up. Now, one thing that did bother me about this binding setup is the position 1, position 2 entry. I felt that it was very difficult to get into position 2 at times. I'd have to essentially just kind of jump up into the air and smash down the board to get enough force to make sure that I'm locked in place in that second position versus the first position, which will give you an excess amount of movement in the heel. Flat surface entry and exit with these bindings is very simple and uneventful. But to be fair and give a balanced, objective review here, it can be a little tricky putting these on and taking them off. Now, of course, the difficulty level of this task will be dictated by the surface grade of the portion of the mountain that you're on. This will also become easier based on how many times you've used the step-on bindings in those locations. I'd always recommend you to put your toe edge up the hill when entering or exiting the setup. So let's move on to how these bindings performed on the mountain while riding. When locked into position 2, these things were great. I personally couldn't tell the difference between the step-on bindings and my strap-on bindings from Burton. Now, for those park riders out there, this setup may be a little stiff for you. For me, I'm not into doing all the jibs, so this system felt great to me. I hit the occasional jump or two, and I felt pretty stable in the air and no different than my strap-on bindings. Another plus to this setup is that I didn't have to retighten my straps on the bindings when going down the hill. I did, however, have to tighten up the boot once or twice throughout the day, but that's it. So here's some final thoughts for the Burton step-on product. I'm personally satisfied with the purchase. It did meet the requirement that I was looking for, which was spending less time with my butt in the snow when coming off the lifts. I feel this setup would work great for any intermediate to expert snowboarder. This is not something that I would probably recommend to somebody that's new, just because of the extra balance factors that goes into riding a snowboard. So if you're looking to spend less time strapping in that snowboard, I highly recommend renting one of these and checking it out. And if you have any other questions, please let me know down below. Peace, I'm out.